So let's go ahead and look at number 1. The question is, how often do you play games with children in the hospital? And of course the answer is each Wednesday. And then number 2, how many times did Jeremy go to the homeless shelter last year? So of course the answer is 10 times, so we can ask how many times. Number 3, how often did you deliver dinners to senior citizens after school last year? How often did you deliver dinners to senior citizens after school last year? Number 4, how many times have you visited your grandfather so far this month? How many times have you visited your grandfather so far this month? Or you can take out so far, you can just say this month. Number 5, how often does Nina take her grandmother to the hairdresser? Number 6, how many times have you worked with elderly people in the past? How many times have you worked with elderly people in the past? Or you can say, how many times did you work with elderly people in the past if you want to use past tense? Okay, let's move on to exercise 2. Okay, so for exercise 2, this is just practicing the tenses. So we're going to do this together. I'll pause a little bit so you can have time to write the correct answer, or you can just say it and then fill it in later. But number 1, the present tense is I volunteer. The past tense is I volunteered. And the present perfect tense is I have volunteered. So we're going to keep going. Number 2, you can see the present perfect tense already written. So the present perfect tense is he has begun. That means the present tense is he begins. And the past tense is he began. Okay, let's look at number 3. So we can see the past tense is they helped. That means the present tense is they help. And the present perfect tense is they have helped. Okay, number 4, the present tense is I take. So the past tense is I took. And the present perfect tense is I have taken. And then number 5, the present perfect tense is we have visited. So the present tense is we visit. And the past tense is we visited. And then number 6, the present tense is I deliver. So the past tense is I delivered. And the present perfect tense is I have delivered. Okay, so moving on, number 3, write the time expressions in order from the smallest number to the biggest number. This is also really easy, so we're going to just go ahead and do this together. So number 1, the smallest time expression is once, obviously just one time. So once. Number 2, twice. 2 times, so just twice is the second smallest. And then number 3, several times. So when we say several, usually we mean like 3 or 4. And then finally, number 4, many times. Okay, so let's keep going. Page 59, exercise 4. Complete the conversation with the present, present perfect, or past forms of the verbs. So let's look at the first conversation. Please tell me a little about your volunteer work. Oh, I have volunteered many times in my life. Okay, so you can see this is present perfect tense. And one of the hints is many times in my life. It's not a specific time in the past, but it's just talking about just throughout this person's life. Okay, so I'm going to give you some time to complete numbers 2 through 5. Okay, so number 2, let's look at the conversation. Really? Are you a volunteer now? Oh, yes. Now I volunteer at the zoo twice a week. So this is present tense. You can see in the question the word now. That's a hint. And we're going to keep going. Number 3. Have you always spent so much time at the zoo? Oh no. Last year I worked in the zoo just once a month. So last year is a big hint. So this is past tense. Okay, so number 4. What about this year? What's your schedule? So for this one, we can say, this year I give tours of the zoo several times each month. But it's more common to use the continuous form, as I mentioned earlier. So you can say, this year I am giving tours of the zoo several times each month. And then number 5. Are your tours popular? Yes, they are. More than 100 people have taken my tours so far. So this is present perfect tense. And so far is a big hint. Okay, let's look at exercise 5. Look at the chart. Write sentences about the volunteers' work last month and this month. Okay, so the chart shows volunteers' activities at the zoo. So we can see number 1 says, give tours for children. And then we can also see the number of times last month and also so far this month. And then number 2, deliver food to the animals. And finally, number 3, help in the gift shop. So let's take a look at the example. Number 1, the volunteers gave tours for children 8 times last month. So this is past tense. And the next one, the volunteers have given tours for children twice so far this month. So this one is present perfect tense. I want you to make questions as well, just like we did in the student's book. Okay, I'll give you some time to go ahead and complete the rest of the sentences as well as the questions. Okay, so for number 2A, we can say, the volunteers delivered food to the animals 30 times last month. And then for B, we can say, the volunteers have delivered food to the animals 12 times so far this month. Okay, we're going to move on to lesson D, reading. So let's open your students' books to page 64. Okay, so let's look at the first activity. Number 1, look at the picture. What is unusual about it? So if you look at this picture, you might notice that 2 men are running while holding a rope. But if you look at number 2, it says, read the title. What do you think the story will be about? So the title is Running with Ropes. Okay, so you might have some ideas about what this story is about. We're going to listen to the audio of the story.
Page 64, Exercise 2.
Running with ropes. Imagine running with your eyes closed. How do you feel? Insecure? Afraid? Justin Andrews knows these feelings very well. Justin is a former long-distance runner who lost his vision because of a grave illness. For the past 6 months, he has been running twice a week with the help of volunteer runners at Running with Ropes, an organization that assists blind and visually impaired runners. Running with Ropes has changed my life, Justin says. Until I heard about it, I thought I'd never run outside again. Volunteers at Running with Ropes make a commitment to volunteer 2 to 4 hours a week. Scott Laponi, one of the running volunteers, explains what they do. We use ropes to join ourselves to the blind runners and guide them around and over obstacles, such as holes in the road and other runners. Scott has learned how to keep the rope loose so the blind runner has more freedom. He deeply respects the blind runner's tenacity. They are incredibly determined, he says. It doesn't matter if it's hot, raining, or snowing, they are going to run. Scott says it is gratifying to share in the joy of the runners and to feel that they trust him. The 4 hours I spend at running with ropes are the most rewarding part of my week, he says. It's really a worthwhile commitment.
Okay, so now let's look on page 65. This is a very academic exercise, so it might take some time for you to write the answers because they require more than just a simple short answer. So I'm going to give you some time. Actually, you can go ahead and pause the video, and when you're finished answering numbers 1 through 5, then you can resume the video. Try to answer in complete sentences. Okay, so number 1, according to the author, why is Running with Ropes a worthwhile organization? You might say that according to the author, Running with Ropes is a worthwhile organization because they can share in the joy of helping blind runners. Number 2, who is Justin Andrews? What happened to him? So you might say, Justin Andrews is a former long-distance runner. And then what happened to him? You can say he lost his vision because of a grave illness. Or you can make that into one sentence. And that sentence is actually in the first paragraph. So Justin is a former long-distance runner who lost his vision because of a grave illness. Number 3, how is Justin able to run? Okay, so you might say Justin is able to run with a volunteer from or through the Running with Ropes organization. Okay, number 4, compare what Justin says in paragraph 1 and what Scott says in the last paragraph about Running with Ropes. How are the statements similar? Okay, so we might say that Justin feels that Running with Ropes has changed his life. You can find that in the first paragraph. And Scott, in the last paragraph, feels that Running with Ropes is the most rewarding part of his week. Or we can see that he also feels it's really a worthwhile commitment. So we might say that the statements are similar in that Justin and Scott both feel that Running with Ropes is worthwhile or is gratifying. Okay? And then number 5, based on Justin and Scott's statements about their experiences, do you think they will continue to participate in the program? Why or why not? So we have some pretty strong evidence that they will continue to participate in the program because they feel that the experience is gratifying or they feel that the organization is worthwhile. Okay, now if you look at the box, the red outlined box on the right, you'll see a note. It says, when you see a new word, look at the words around it to guess if the meaning is positive or negative. So we call these context clues. The example says, he lost his vision because of a grave illness. Now, you can guess that grave has a negative meaning because loss of vision and illness are both negative events. So the context clues tell us that grave is a negative word or a word with a negative meaning. And now if you look at exercise B, build your vocabulary, it says look at the reading tip above, which we just did. Then in the reading passage, underline the words from the chart. Decide if their meanings are positive or negative. Fill in the clues that helped you guess. So if you look at the word grave that we just saw in the reading tip, we can see that it has a negative meaning. And the clue is he lost his vision because of an illness. And then number 2, insecure. You can find that in the first paragraph toward the top. It says, imagine running with your eyes closed. How do you feel? Insecure? Afraid? Okay, so I'm going to give you some time to do numbers 2 through 7. So find each word in the story and underline it. And then fill out the chart and the clues. Okay, so number 3, impaired. So you can find the word impaired toward the end of the first paragraph, and it's in the phrase that says, an organization that assists blind and visually impaired runners. So the context clues of blind and visually impaired runners shows you that impaired is a negative, has a negative meaning. And then number 4, freedom. You already know this word, but let's go ahead and find it. You can see that at the bottom of the first column, it says, Scott has learned how to keep the rope loose, so the blind runner has more freedom. Okay, now for this one, the clues might be that Scott has learned how to keep the rope loose. If the rope is loose, then the blind runner has a little bit more freedom to run at his own pace, or he doesn't need to feel like he's being dragged along. So we know that freedom has a positive meaning. Okay, and then number 5, tenacity. That is at the top of the second column. So you can see from the bottom of the first column, he deeply respects the blind runner's tenacity. So the clues of deeply respects show us that tenacity is a positive word. And let's look at number 6, gratifying. Now that is in the middle of the second column where it says, Scott says it is gratifying to share in the joy of the runners and to feel that they trust him. So there's so many words here that show that gratifying is a positive word. So share in the joy, feel that they trust him. Those phrases help us to understand that gratifying has a very similar meaning to the word satisfying. Sounds similar, satisfying, gratifying. It means something that is worthwhile or rewarding, as it says in number 7, rewarding. So that is right after the sentence that we just read. So the 4 hours I spend at running with ropes are the most rewarding part of my week. So the author is concluding with a positive note about running with ropes. So you can see the words like worthwhile, rewarding, gratifying, they are all similar. So we can see that it's also a positive word. Okay, now I'm going to skip number 2, but you can do that on your own time. So you can find 4 more words from the reading and try to determine if it has a positive or negative meaning, depending on the context clues. Okay, and then also exercise C. This one I'm not going to do in the video because, of course, this requires a lot of interactive conversation. So you can do this on your own as well, but this is really good for practicing conversation. So if you have time, please go ahead and do numbers 1 through 4 on your own.